What happened to me early on is they were going to take my life at birth because my mom is so little and my head was so big. And they decided if push comes to shove, we're going to save the mother. It was really a surprise to everybody that we both lived. And I was born in Hungary, Budapest, Hungary. When I was 6 years old, I was going to the local school, like kindergarten, down the street, and somebody jumped out from behind a bush and put a bag over my head and carried me away. And it was my father. I realized my father and my mom, they didn't have a good relationship, so he kidnapped me and he put me in this house where he had moved out. And every day I was in the backyard. He locked me out of the house like a dog whenever he left. And then he told me all these things against my family. And my uncle came and
Which uncle?
my uncle, his name is Leslie.
No, but like the mother's side or the
Mother's side.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's my mother's side. So he came to bribe me and he said, I'll take you to a soccer game. So I said, no, I can't because he can't come home and I'm not here. I'll be in trouble. So anyway, after a lot of convincing, he convinced me, he promised I'd be back and all this stuff. Anyway, he was lying. And
And he.
Oh my gosh.
so we were on this bus and we're going past all these soccer games and I kept saying, this. No, we're going to a better one. We're going to the
my
big
goodness.
stadium and all that. And then the sun was setting. I said, it doesn't look like we're going. Anyway, he forced me to come back home to my mother and my sister. And of course, then that convinced me that everything my dad had said was true and that they're they're brainwashing me and lying to me. And
How old were you?
so I was rejecting them now. Anyway, it was very confusing.
Yeah. And you were
And-
still 6?
And I was like probably 5 or 6
Wow.
when this was the last time I saw my dad. Yeah, ever. But one day in Budapest, I was in the house. It was an afternoon or evening. Sun was setting. And all these fireworks were going off. Looking through the window, what it was is the revolution started, this uprising, and it was bombs. And then
They weren't fireworks.
suddenly, not fireworks. Suddenly, this thing came through and busted the big windows, right through the windows, and I was in that room. And I dived under either a couch or a bed, and all these red hot pieces of metal, it looked like, were all over the room, shrapnel. I had no idea what it was. And then I tried to get out from under the bed and I tore. There's like a nail that went into my arm. You can still see a scar about an inch long. I made that scar during that time. And it turns out this was the revolution. My father was a Christian minister and he taught us to pray when, things were bad.
Your father that
How
had
long-
kidnapped you?
Yes.
How long had they been married? Or had they been divorced all that time?
No, they were not divorced.
They weren't.
No, this
So-
just happened.
That's not a culture that you really get divorced and
Oh.
you just go your separate
So
ways.
they had been married, and yet he was kidnapping you just because they weren't getting along. And
Yeah,
he had moved out.
to hurt her.
Oh wow.
And he would take me to bars and then call her up and that
Oh.
kind of thing to hurt
Oh,
her.
okay.
Yeah. So it was like they were trying to hurt and I was just a pawn.
yeah.
So I realized there was this rumbling. Our house was right on a significant street. There was this rumbling and I go out there and these tanks, that looked really weird. And I thought, what are these? It was like to me it was like some foreign thing coming. And I didn't know there were people inside. Then I realized this is people killing people, how weird.
My goodness.
And it was really disconcerting.
Yeah.
It turned out that my mother was involved in this revolution and her name ended up on a black list. And when the communist Russians came and, really squelched it, because initially they were not strong enough to squelch it, but then they sent reinforcements and they took over. And there were bread lines by that time because it was tough to get food. And so our family was rotating their place in line to get to the front of the line. So my best friend, his name was Adam in Hungarian. He and we decided to climb a tree so we could see the end of the bread line that was going past our house up over the hill. And He was sitting on this side of the tree, and I was sitting here. Suddenly, a bullet came and hit him, and he fell down, and I thought he died. At that moment was my first real prayer, and I called out to God. I don't know where it came from, but I cried out to God on the tree, and because I saw it might as well have been me who got hit and went down. And I said, God, I am through with this. I have had it. I don't want to do this anymore. I can't live like this. And I'm giving my life to you. You do with me whatever you want because I'm done. That was my prayer.
Wow.
It is over. I'm done. I don't want to do this. And I'm making you responsible, whatever you want to do with me, because I can't handle it. It's too much for me. That was such a good prayer.
Things happen when we pray that, right?
It was like I connected with God. And when I came down, I was like a different person. That was my first real, what I consider my first real encounter with God. It was so precious. And from then on, I had this faith that whatever happens, my life might as well have ended on the tree,
Oh,
Sure.
And it was so great because I relaxed. I started to relax and kick back and, this is beyond my control. I'm not going to try to make this happen. So I almost died. For example, I almost died of pneumonia in France after we escaped. And the nurses were telling my mom, they've never seen such a happy kid, And I was so happy because I was still alive. So what happened then, our neighbor was promoted because he was an idealistic communist. He was philosophically in agreement with sharing the wealth and that kind of thing. And so he was promoted to a high position. He found out our name was on the list and we were going to get killed. He took a risk to tell us. And he even sent his secretary in a train to go to Austria because that would have been the easy way to go. And this woman spent the day going to Austria and coming back. She said it was the worst day of her life because they stopped the train so many times and all these machine guns always, and it was just too late to go. So we tried to escape a number of other ways. My mother tried to put us, me and my sister. I have a sister who's a year and a half younger, and her name is Sophia. And she made arrangements to put us in the trunk of a Red Cross car that was going to pick up supplies, and the guy agreed, and then just before he took off, he said, I can't do this. I can't be responsible for 2 kids. What am I going to do? Just let them go.
Oh my goodness.
So he said, no, I can't do this. And so I was very happy about that. Another time we had some agreement with a guy who drove a truck and carried chickens in the truck and in the back, and he would throw in some people with the chickens and smuggle them,
Oh my goodness.
and he never showed up. And it turned out he got arrested the day before and killed,
Oh.
So there were a number of attempts to escape. And finally, my mother rigged up something else. And she really wanted a divorce before we left, and that was beyond my understanding and all. But one day she said, we're ready to go. So we got into this train, and we're sitting across from each other, and suddenly she says, you are not my son. And I said, what? Well, you're not really my son. We're going to go, and we're going to take you to your real mother. That's what we're doing right now. And that was so disconcerting to me. It's like, how come all of a sudden you're not my mother anymore? How could this happen?
Oh my goodness.
How
So
old were you at this point?
what?
How old were you at this point?
I was maybe going on to 7.
Oh, wow.
So suddenly she's no longer my mother. And it was, anyway, when the train stopped, they unloaded everybody from the train. And I forgot that she's no longer my mom because I got sick in my stomach. And I ran up to her and said, Mommy, I'm sick. And they arrested us. And then we were at the detention camp. And, I blew the plan.
Well,
And
she could have warned you.
I understand. So
You're an adult.
the thing is, it was
Yeah.
tough to understand how magically she's no longer my mom. And we were in this detention camp, me and my sister and my mom. And they were processing people from like 3 weeks before that they caught, so it was like going to be a long wait. My mom said, no way, this is a wrong arrest. We're not going to stay here. And so she ordered the soldier to let us go to the bathroom. And the soldier refused. Then she saw some other soldier who looked like he may have had a higher rank. So she told the higher rank soldier that this soldier won't let us go to the bathroom. And the guy said, what? You can go to the bathroom. So he let us go to the bathroom. So because the soldier had just been, shown off by my mom, my mother said to him, take me to the leader of this camp. I need to talk to him because we can't stay here. It was a mistake. Suddenly, the guy takes us. He starts marching. She's ordering him to march, and he's marching. Took us to the leader of the whole camp and knocked on the door. And the guy comes, and he says, what is this? My soldiers obeying this little woman? How could this possibly be? So he invited us in.
Oh my goodness. And your sister too. You and
my
your
sister.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so we got in there, and he gave us chocolates, and he's asking us all these questions. And they're going through all our stuff, and my mom said, we have to go. We have this reason. We're going to go to a city named Baya near the border. And by this time, I caught on that that's where we're going, and we're going to see my real mom and all this stuff. And they were searching through our stuff. And all of a sudden, they were searching through our stuff, and this was the Bible that he came across, and it's very fine print. You can hardly see anything. And we don't know what he thought. But there was a piece of paper like this that fell out. And this is a copy of the actual paper, and this is the actual Bible. And, I brought it because Jeannie has really treasured this. So this piece of paper, handwritten in Hungarian, fell out. And this guy couldn't read English. He thought, it was some kind of spy book or something, a King James Bible with all kinds of margins in English. And he said, what is this? And she said, it's not something you may be interested in. Then that piece fell out. And that is a handwritten quote to encourage us that someone gave us that my mom put in the Bible. And it's from 2 Chronicles chapter 20 and verse 9. So here's what it said. If when evil comes upon us as the sword, judgment, or pestilence, or famine, we stand before this house. And this was a prayer of Jehoshaphat. And he's praying this. He said, if evil comes upon us, we stand before this house, and in your presence, for your name is in this house. And we cry out to you in our affliction. Then you will hear and save. He read this. And he said, where do you say you want to go? And we said, Baya. He said, you can go. Then my mom said,
Because he took this as referring to himself.
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And my mother said, you say we can go, but when we go out there, they're just going to collect us again. You have to put it in writing. He said, I'll do better than that. And he picked up the phone, and he held the last train that was going to go, and he called his own chauffeur with his own car, and he put us in the car.
Wow.
And all these people said, what mistake did we make? Who is this that we arrested? You could see it on their faces.
Yeah.
And it was like they gave us this ride and held the train. And then they clear out a whole compartment in the train. They just put me and my sister and my mom in there, and they put a soldier in front of the door. They said, whatever you want, you just tell us.
Oh my goodness.
And we had this incredible ride into this place where we wanted to go. Of course, we got there late. It was after 10, and they could shoot you on sight because curfew was 10. And my mom says, I don't know where the house is. To me, I said, I don't know either. It was like, so we were looking for help, and we were walking through the streets. It was dark, and suddenly we hear this singing voice. It was a guy singing like Italian opera or something, at the top of his voice, and we stop him and we say, what are you doing, singing so loud? He said, I am the cook for all these soldiers. And I told them, if you ask me one more time, I'm not cooking for you anymore. So they gave me permission to go home anytime I want. And so I'm singing. And that guy gave us directions. And we went to the house. And when we knocked on the door, a woman opened the door. And she looked at us and she fainted. And I've never seen anyone faint before. And it was like, this lady just went down. It's like, what happened? And then she woke up and she fainted again.
Oh my goodness, she really couldn't believe it.
She could not believe we would end up there, that we could be there. So there was a guy, his name was Matt, who was a spy for the Yugoslavians, and he was an interpreter for the Hungarians for Russian, because he spoke Russian. And in his spare time, he smuggled people like us across the border. And he had never taken kids before. He said, I don't do kids. So that was really hard on my mom because, she had to choose between basically her life and kids. And she convinced him at least to take me because I could handle it. I was 7 or whatever. So we left my sister and we went that night.
How could she?
And it was dark. I didn't even say goodbye to my sister. I didn't know we were leaving her. And we're going through these backyards. One dog starts barking, then another dog, in the whole neighborhood, everyone's barking, you know what I mean? They just stimulate each other to bark. And we were walking on these dark streets with a big wall on one side. And all of a sudden, this searchlight comes on. These big searchlights, like at the mall? Big searchlight comes on right on us, from in front. And this guy, Matthew, immediately became drunk and started to make friends with the soldiers who turned on the light. And my mom backed me off, and there was another college student with us. And we went into this gate, and guns came at our back. So it was clear that was not the right way to go.
Oh.
So we went back forward. But this guy, Matthew, he gave him cigarettes, he gave him alcohol, and either they never saw us or who knows what happened. They turned the light out, they let him go, and then he came back and got us. So we were going for like 3 hours, and he would have a flashlight and just shine it, at the ground, and it was like he knew exactly where we were. It was amazing to me. And suddenly he realized in the fog, in the darkness, we had made a big circle, 3 hours. We were nowhere. He said, that's it, we'll do it tomorrow. My mom said, absolutely not, we're doing it right now.
Oh.
It turned out the next day, tomorrow, they were looking for him to arrest him, hang him, whatever, because they discovered he was doing this at night. So this was our only chance to get out. And we walked. The thing I remember is probably the main thing. We were walking, there was a fence to our left, and there were dogs barking, and suddenly I could hear dogs chewing up people, they were trying to get across maybe. That was my assessment, I don't know.
We're
So-
chewing on something.
Hmm?
Wow.
Yeah, and then,
For a 7-year-old kid,
because
that's
there'd
what
be
you would think.
squealing,
Yeah.
there'd be crying and squealing and yelling and screaming and suddenly silence. And that's how I figured,
Oh.
Anyway, we finally made it to the border. It was broad daylight. We could see the soldiers on the horseback, and we were walking across. And it was really a weird thing for me because it was like there's no line, Suddenly they said, we made it. So we made it. What do you mean? It looks exactly the same on the other side.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
Wow.
no.
Serious.
Anyway, I was so happy. I climbed this rock and I was making some kind of sound, and he threw me down. He said,
Yeah.
that's crazy. We went to this detention camp, a refugee camp, and the Yugoslavians got American dollars for every refugee through NATO or some organization. Every refugee they kept, they got money. They got so much money that they didn't want to let anybody go because they were
Oh.
making so much money off
my
the
goodness.
refugees. So they declared our camp non-existent, and we were staying there for months. We couldn't get out. A couple weeks later, once we got there, Matthew went back to get my sister, and that was his last trip. And that's when he found out they were looking for him the day after. You know,
wow.
that if we had gone the night after, we wouldn't have gone. So anyway, that was my story up to that. Then, as I mentioned, in France, I almost died. Finally, we got out of Yugoslavia through France. We were refugees, and some people kept us. Then we got into Switzerland. We got sponsored. And then suddenly, my mom wanted us to stay in an orphanage, my sister and me, because she felt she couldn't work and pay for us and take care of us at the same time.
So your sister made it out.
Yes.
Okay.
He went back to get her.
But she made it, and,
And-
they
and
made
he
that,
carried
Matthew
her.
lived.
Yes,
He
and that
carried
was
her.
it.
Wow.
That was, yeah. And then we parted ways, and he was part of the Swedish parliament later. Okay, he was an orphan also, and he stayed with his uncle. And then when World War II came, the Germans came and recruited him, and they said, if you come with us, we'll give you a free education. So his uncle let him go, and they trained him to be a spy. And on his first mission over Russia, he was shot down, and they were arrested. And he was put in this circular camp where they were all having to sit in circles. And every morning, they would call like 10 names, apparently at random, and then you'd hear 10 shots, and they were all executed. And then when his name came up, because he was only 16, they gave him a choice of life in prison to work. And he chose that. And he said they had to actually join gangs in the Siberian prison to survive. Like if somebody died, they would keep this guy looking like he was alive, so they would get his food rations and stuff like that. One day he decided to go for this American ship and almost made it. He said that he was almost reaching when the Russians got him. And his back was shredded and he was in really bad shape. Anyway, this is the guy who helped us across. We were so grateful for him. Amazing story. So that was kind of my early childhood, you know. And then I grew up in Switzerland in these orphanages, and my mom could come and visit us twice a year. If she'd miss a visit, it'd be that was 6 months, you know. And because the Swiss kids, they pay so much attention to their own, if you don't sound like them, they ostracize, they just don't like you. So I decided I'm going to block out Hungarian and just learn their language. And in one night, I decided I'm going to remember how to count, but everything else I can't. And even when my mom came, I couldn't talk to her in Hungarian anymore. It was such a clear thing that happened. So you move 50 miles, the dialect is slightly different, and you have to learn that. And so, anyway, long story short, so I grew up in these orphanages, and to my knowledge, certainly up to that day, I was the only one who made it out of there to like a higher education. What happened is I was getting C's and everything because, you know, they said C's are average. You know, I said, that's good enough. That's average. And then we were going on this walk on a Sunday. Every Sunday we'd go on this walk with the nuns, and they would tell us things. And one day she said, you know, you could make A's if you want. I said, well, 4, you know, C, it says, is good enough. So she said, well, give it a try. So I was whenever the teacher wanted the class to shut up, he would hit me on the head. And then everyone would shut up. So I had some authority in that class. And then I asked the guy who sat next to the smartest guy in the class to move, because I'm moving in there. And he did. And I started to do whatever this smartest kid did, and I started getting A's all the time. I said, this is so easy. This is so much fun. It's, you know, it is a lot of fun. So that's how I got
Oh my goodness.
And this was high school.
This was just
Higher education.
You
no,
left
lower.
Catholic school.
Yeah.
No,
okay,
like
still in-
4th grade or
still-
5th
Still in
grade.
Switzerland.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
And anyway, that's what happened.